So did you want to do question and answer now, Mary?
Yes, because there's lots
Very
of
good.
stuff.
There's actually like 35 of us here, 34 people. So very good. Yeah. I guess we can open up the questions. I'll start off with a question. It's I think the hypnosis is kind of like the cutting edge in our sort of relationship with aliens and learning about it. What do you say to people in the UFO community who say that hypnosis shows that the aliens are a threat or they shouldn't be trusted? There's this a lot of negative press, you could say, to the UFO community. Then there's also kind of the Christian view that all of this is demonic. What would you say to these people, you know, from the results you're getting?
Well, you know my perspective on that. And first of all, I'd like to say that the actual real research demonstrates something quite different. And it's not just my own research that has come and accepts that as not being valid at all, because what I'm seeing after regressions, for the most part, these beings have been connected to the individual on some level. They've been interacting with them all through their lives. And one of the questions that I am very keen to ask when they're having a regression is, have you on any level consented to these experiences for whatever reason? And many of them say, yes, before I came here. Now, the problem with that for nuts and bolts ufologists is we're taking this into the spiritual realm and talking about a soul, and we're talking about a soul consenting to come here and have experiences. So if you've got a problem with that, then you're going to have a problem with that kind of answer. What we discovered with the book that, you know, the Beyond UFOs with the Dr. Edgar Mitchell free organization, was when we did the surveys and we asked people about their experiences, their conscious recall of their experiences, over 4,000, I think 300 individuals, and asked them the ultimate understanding of their interaction with these beings. 85% of them said quite clearly that they had a psycho-spiritual transformation. There was only about 15% that felt it was negative and what have you. That's out of 4,300 people, conscious recall, and 600 questions on all aspects of this. So if we're getting that as a result, and that's without my own understanding, my own regression work, where I was finding time and time again, the more the person understood their experiences and their connection to these beings, primarily it shifted and changed their consciousness in a positive way. One of the interesting things with Greg, when he was saying, when he asked to be conscious of being up on the craft, and they agreed to that, he wasn't sure whether he went up in an out-of-body state or a physical state. And the interesting thing with that was he said it felt very real. We have discovered through the same surveys of the, you know, the Free Foundation, was that 75% of encounters are out of body, not physical. So again, we're talking about consciousness. And this is the issue, I think, that's been the stumbling block between nuts and bolts ufologists and those that are exploring it from a more multidimensional level, is that you can't look at it from a 3D perspective, because it goes beyond the 3D. It goes into the multidimensional. And that is where now we need to look. We need to look at consciousness itself. What is consciousness? When we still have people, you know, believing that only things that we can see with our five senses is valid, while we're still living in that inaccurate paradigm, we are never going to understand what this is all about, because it is beyond that. It is beyond our five senses. And that is what hypnosis demonstrates to me time and time again, is that ability to access the multi-dimensional.
Very good. Yeah. And I like that kind of evidence. So just so the audience, this is the book you're referring to, the free study, Beyond UFOs. I'll put the link below the video for people as well to see this.
So my granddaughters were working on, they had each had a sheet of construction paper in front of them, and their dad had made like rulered lines. So the idea was, is they're going to first they're going to decorate and design what's going to be in each band, and then they'll cut them and then they'll turn them into chains. But Alani was telling me that I was asking her what was on her different bands. I said, it looks like there's a person, you know, in one of those. And she says, oh yeah, that's a human. And I said, well, it looks like you have more than one human on there. And so then she started pointing out all the humans. And then she says, and this one is an alien. And that was the first time she has said that. And so I like perked up and I thought, if I were there in that room, I would like have all kinds of like little questions. What does this alien look like? And, you know, have you, you know, how come you don't draw more, you know, whatever. But I didn't feel like I had the, you know, the freedom or the flexibility to do that since her mom was the one, you know, holding the camera on him. But they say that so frequently that it just has me kind of tuned in. But this was the first time she didn't just mention humans, but she mentioned an alien as well. That she
Wow,
was
and she's
drawing.
4.5 years old, right?
Yes, yes.
Wow, so this is coming from inside of her.
Maybe. So she has let's see, she'll turn 5 in April.
Wow. Yeah, I want to introduce you to Marion. Yeah, this is Josie. I mentioned her, sure,
Hi,
her various
Josie.
experiences, so you can
Hi,
connect.
Mary.
Hi.
Mary, thank you so much for that. I just wanted to make a comment that one of the things that really strikes me in regressions, whether they're hypnotic or whether people remember, is that so many similarities between people that are completely different backgrounds, maybe different languages and cultures. They all see a screen. A lot of it, as you say, is dimensional, interdimensional, higher dimension, inner dimension, who knows? And the other thing is time. Time seems to be very, very entrenched in there. See the similarities in a lot of abduction experiences. And a lot of times, even when people think that it's a negative thing, eventually when they kind of not warm up to it, but eventually they begin to understand it in a different way. And to me, it seemed like that screen that everybody sees, you know, and Greg saw it. And one thing about Greg that I just quickly want to say is that he seemed, when he was in regular consciousness, he seemed almost scared of the whole phenomenon. And once he was in there, he was a scientist. You know, he completely changed, and it was like his understanding was huge.
Thank you, Mimi. And you're quite right. Greg was very ambivalent about
Yes.
exploring it because it had always been there, but he had never known how to put it all together. And I mean, there was more than one regression. And each time he opened up more and more to what he was learning. And everything led to him even coming to this particular location was guided from his experiences on board craft. And the classic there was a whole town seeing this, and his next door neighbors saw it and had completely forgotten this huge football-sized craft coming over, and nothing about it, absolutely nothing from anyone. And it's like, you know, they were in this trance state, all leaving together, as he explained. And we know that people can be picked up and have an experience they may be outside, they may be in the car, they may be at home, and they'll describe them going up on the craft and everyone else in an almost paralyzed until they've been brought back. And it's almost like they're I find quite fascinating, saying, why didn't somebody see you being picked up, or that you disappeared or anything, but they've been switched off. And how they do that, I'm not really quite sure, but they do, so that they can pick that person up for a particular experience. And the other thing that is really important there is the time anomaly, where someone can think they've just, you know, they've missed a couple of minutes or something. They could have been on the craft half an hour. They could have been on the craft an hour, and it will be like seconds or minutes in our time. And this is why there are so many anomalies with that as well, because of the fact they can stretch time or condense time, what we call it time. but in terms of our, the way we look at it.
Okay, and Crystal had her hand up. Okay, Crystal, good to have you here.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Mary. Yeah, so I'm an abductee, contactee, and I'm pretty sure that I'm probably one of those hybrid people because I have had a lifetime of abductions, and I do experience a ton of contact, even lately, all the time experiencing contact. But my question for you was, as a young child and in my younger years, I started off having experiences where I was being physically abducted, right? And I even have a bead like behind my ear, and I have UFO footage, and everybody in the group has seen. I do sometimes presentations here too. But what I noticed was, and this is what I was going to ask you about, is that the form of contact has changed over the years. And I noticed that the contact that I have, which is about 4 times a week now, sometimes, especially with all the things going on Earth, but a lot of it's coming through in the dream space. Have you noticed with other people that you've worked with that their form of contact is more heightened, or they're experiencing it more in their dream space?
One of the things in my questionnaire is about dreams, because this is always the question that many have. They'll say to me, well, I do have some strange dreams where I see myself on a spacecraft with X, Y, and Z and all the rest of it. And I say to them, well, when was that dream? And they say, oh, it might have been about 10 years ago or something or other. And I said, and you still remember it? Have you not questioned why you still remember it? Because most dreams disappear within seconds or minutes of you waking up. If it's a dream that you've still remembered, no matter how many weeks or months or years, then it's most likely not a dream. The thing is that they have this misconception that it's a dream because it's in a trance state or an altered state, so that it doesn't feel quite as solid to them as their everyday experience. But absolutely, the dreams that many have, like yourself, and it has changed in the 25 years I've been involved, in terms of more and more people are having very conscious, very aware contact with the, various intelligences now, particularly the new generations. And I would see yourself in that kind of, where they're having conscious contact with a variety of different beings, and they will either see energy fields, orbs as another way the communication happens, because we know that many of these intelligences will present as an orb, where they'll have contact that way. There'll be a light being or whatever, and it is, in their reality, except for the fact that they don't, they may only see an energy field or feel an energy field close to them or whatever. So with the more integrated, awake individuals, this is how it's happening now. It's not happening in an unconscious way anymore. It's happening in a very physical way. And many of those that I'm working with now have absolutely conscious awareness of their interactions. They may not always know which intelligences they're connected to. They may even, like yourself, those that feel they're a hybrid may actually say, my sense is that I've got an origin in Arcturus or Pleiades, or I'm from another dimension. So there's a lot more conscious awareness. That the biggest issue they have is getting acceptance of that. It's even more so than hypnosis. Well, in hypnosis, maybe we can sort of believe that, but you're just saying you're having interactions with this, and this, and this. Oh, come on, and whatever. So it's even harder to have that accepted, I think, than it is if you can prove it via a session in hypnosis, where you can go and you can describe all of those kinds of things. So that's the next level of difficulty in acceptance of this as a reality. And yet more and more are like you, are more and more conscious of their interactions on a regular basis. And you don't have to go to a field in the middle of nowhere to see a craft. If you're connected to them, you can walk outside and have a feeling you should go outside, like Peter Slattery and so many others do, and they're there waiting for you to film them. So, they find quite incredible as people say, oh, we went and we did a CE5. And I'm not knocking the CE5 because I think it's a shared experience and it is about consciousness. But I'm also saying that many people are having contact might be just going to, get themselves, a Chinese. And there is the craft in front of them, saying, hi, we're here.
Have you worked with people who are experiencing bilocation when they're going into their dream states? So they're having a simultaneous bilocation where they're going up onto the crafts, but their body is laying in bed sleeping. I'm just curious if you want to speak to that for a second.
Yes, a few cases like that have happened. I'm not sure with the bilocation whether or not they have a form as such. Maybe, there's a sense of the form of their spirit body can perhaps create a particular form, because a lot of it now does seem to be out of body in many cases of going on the craft. The other part of that is that some of them are aware they're on the craft and they will go, if it's an out of body spirit body, they'll go into one of the forms on board craft. For example, they will say, I went into a Zeta form, or I went into a Mantis form, or I went into another one, which was kind of waiting for them to inhabit while they're actually on the craft. And I've had 8-year-old explain that to me, how it happened to him as a mantis, going on to a mantis form from his physical human form because it's family, and he evaporated into it. And another lady seeing herself as a Zeta scientist on board craft. And I said, well, where's your physical body? And she said, well, it's sort of over there waiting for me. And I said, well, how do you get from your Zeta body back into your human form? And she described a ball of light leaving the Zeta and reanimating her physical body. We are only just exploring, the edge of what is possible when we're out of body.
I have a couple of questions about Greg. When he said he's about pyramids and one is about breathing, and the breathing question was, he said he had breathing techniques that allowed him to speak with them, the creatures, beings. Did he elucidate on what breathing techniques there were that helped him to open his mind, his spirit, his heart? And then the other question I have is, he mentioned they showed him pyramidal structures that were good for healing. And a number of my friends have pyramids in their homes, small ones, to help with whatever they have in mind. So my question to you is, did he mention that having these pyramids in our 3D plane, in our homes, was worthwhile? Is it healing?
Yeah.
Is it full body shape, or small ones that some of my friends have that?
Yeah.
So the breathing and the pyramids, what breathing techniques, and how big are those pyramids going to be?
First of all, he didn't go into the detail of how that breathing technique was to communicate. I should have followed that through and said, can you demonstrate how you actually managed to communicate through this breathing technique? Maybe someone else who's got that understanding might come forward and say, this is because this particular species operates through that method. I don't know anymore. The pyramids that he went and described to me many times, and hoped that one day we would develop something like that in our town, was a huge pyramid, and in it would be many levels where there would be various healing techniques and various, like we hear about the med beds and this kind of thing. He was describing a similar kind of thing that they were showing him, various crystals that you would be laying on for various kinds of healing. And he was shown all of this, and this was, his future. He was shown this. Sadly, it never materialized, because, he was always, where would put the pyramid, Mary, in Agnes, which is a little town. So it never actually manifested, which is, I think, a real shame. But if it ever came to the point where we could do that, it would be, but it was like a huge building that was pyramid shaped, not just a little one.
Thank you, Mary.
I'm an ongoing experiencer from birth. My first remembered experience happened when I was about 13, 14. I awoke on a craft. I was paralyzed right after an egg extraction beamed me back into my bed. Thereafter, I've had many other experiences. Most recently are pregnancies, and I've had miscarriages, things like that. Also with my daughter just before she turned 5 years old. She's almost 10 now. There was egg extraction. There was some abnormal bruising on the outside of her vagina, but there was no penetration. We had taken her to Children's Hospital and she was examined, and they found 3 equally spaced pinpricks on her cervix. So there was egg extraction then. And what I was told telepathically was that they do that when they're younger because so they don't remember it. Because somebody like myself that had egg extraction at puberty, I remembered it. I woke up. So there's been many, many experiences. Mary, I'm just wondering if you have any other people that have mentioned these kind of experiences, like their children having eggs taken.
One of the accounts I remember, they're actually grown up now, they're an adult, but there was one very similar kind of experience when they were 6 years old. And
Okay.
What was interesting is that they connected to being a dual consciousness, in other words, part human, part ET. And I remember saying to them, what I ask in hypnosis many times, have you on any level consented to this experience? She answered really in a weird way. She said, yes, no. So I said, what do you mean by yes, no? And she said, well, my ET self is absolutely fine with it, but my human self didn't realize how traumatic it was going to be. And she said, and that's what I'm dealing with, and that's what I'm struggling with. And that was when she was 6.
Oh,
that she
wow.
had that experience. So I haven't heard of a lot of children, particularly at this point, that have had the egg extraction, mostly a little bit older than that, like you were talking about puberty and what have you. Certainly the missing pregnancy side of it has come up more than a little with many, many women. I actually write a whole chapter on it, actually, in my book, Awakening, because there are so many women that get taken on board craft and shown their hybrid children and connecting to their hybrid children, which is what they asked them to do. And one of the most interesting of that was a lady from Brazil who contacted me, who was formerly an air hostess. And she ended up, one of her experiences was with what she called a tall being she called the feline, who was like a mother to her that visited her as a child. And as she was growing up, she didn't know her connection to the feline species. And when she was an air hostess, she said, I was in a hotel on my way to breakfast and I see this small child standing in the corridor. And she said, and I was worried about them because they were on their own. There was no parent around. So she goes up to this child and says, are you all right? Where's your mum? The child turns round and it's part feline, part human. It scares her so much. She runs down the corridors thinking she's seen a monster. And it's only later that she remembers going on board craft. And there is this child who she now realizes was actually one of her hybrid children. And there's a story that goes with that, is that her 6-year-old daughter, she now sees, has gone up on the craft and plays with her hybrid sister, who's the feline. And what's a little bit more of that story is the husband is also had experiences. And he comes out one day to say to her, you do know our 6-year-old is a hybrid mantis being. And she's just been told the same thing by the beings, that her 6-year-old daughter, although looks human, is actually also a hybrid mantis. So we're getting this kind of thing going on now, which really takes it to a whole new level of our connection to many of these different intelligences and the hybridization that's going on and the mix of species, which one 8-year-old very excitedly told me about some years ago, where she'd had this experience a few days prior to talking to me. And she said, I'm taken on board craft and I'm taken to a place where they're showing me how to levitate and how to use my third eye. Then they show me this connection of interbreeding with different species, and told that they seed other planets in this universe and other universes. So she was actually shown this at 8 years old. So there's a whole agenda program that takes us into a whole new realm of our interactions with these intelligences. And that's just a small piece of some of the research that I'm hearing.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Starshine.
One, how do you know that the witness isn't confabulating? Because if somebody hypnotized me and I've never been hypnotized, I've got 68 years of information. And how do I put that aside and make sure that what I'm giving is whatever happened that I don't remember? Two, are you sometimes unavoidably or intentionally leading the patient in the questions? Because if you're saying, okay, did you see some grays? That might trigger a response. Or what did you see, as opposed to as very specific? In other words, trying to lead them with generalities and let them fill in the information. So those are my questions. Thank you.
And it's one that I'm asked many, many times, and it's a very valid one if you don't understand or you haven't really worked, as I've done, doing hundreds of cases now of regression and working in the field. And if you're trained well, you don't use leading questions with anything. So that's the first thing. How do I know it's not something they've made up? And it's very simple. And I explain it to people when I take them into hypnosis, the difference between them creating something and something they're actually seeing. And I explain it like this: because we all have a bedroom and it's real. We all know where the bed is, where the window is, you know, where the door is, what color the curtains are, or whatever, because it's real. If I said to you, create a bedroom, you'd have to think, well, how big would it be? Where would I put the bed? Would I have one or two windows? Whatever. The whole process is completely different to a reality. So when I take somebody into hypnosis and I'm asking them, what are you standing on? Or are you inside or outside? I'm not telling them anything. I'm just asking them what they sense, feel, or see. What's in front of you? What's the next thing that happens? I'm not saying this is what happens or that is what happens. I'm asking them what's the next thing that happens. Now, to create something that might happen takes a completely different process to what are you seeing? Because you're saying, what are you seeing? It's not create something to see, it's what are you seeing? And so you know the language that isn't leading. And it's a classic anyway. One of the hypnotherapists many years ago, would throw out, what's in the corners of the craft, and they automatically say, well, there's no corners, which tells you that you can't lead them. And when they're in that space, they are literally telling you what they're perceiving, sensing, or feeling, and what happens next. You notice with all my processes, what happens next. I'm not telling them what happens next. I'm just saying, what is the next part of that experience that you're experiencing or whatever. I may use sense or feeling, because sometimes it's a bit of everything, just like Greg was talking about, he smelt what they smelt like. Now, that's something you can't create either. If you ask them, well, what do they smell like? Oh, what could I create? Oh, I'll make them smell like what? Poppies or bloody roses. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a different process. That's how you know. And it comes out like this. The information comes out this fast. Whereas if you've got to confabulate or create it, it's a completely different thing. And then afterwards, one of the questions, because sometimes it can be so extraordinary for them to even want to, can I really believe what I've just said? They'll go, oh, can I really believe that? And I'll say, let me ask you something. If I said to you, create a scenario identical to that, do you think you would have come out with something like that? And you can bet your bottom dollar, they said, not in a million years. Not in a million years would I have ever created that, because it's too bizarre, it's too weird, it's too strange. And so, I do try and play devil's advocate primarily to help them take on board, well, this is what you've come up with, guy, lady, or what, gentleman, this is what you come up with. Now, how does it feel? And the other question I'll ask is, does it resonate on any level? And you can bet your bottom dollar it does, even though they don't want to admit to it. They will say, yes, that the problem is it does. So these are all testers for me. And because you're so well informed, and there are many that are, because I'll say to them, have you read anything or whatever? I've got no problem with people reading stuff. and learning about making sense of their own experience, because I think that actually is very valuable and helpful. But they'll say to me, well, maybe it's because I've read it. That's the favorite. You know, I must have read it somewhere, or I've seen a film on that and what have you. And I said, the reason you resonate to what you've read is because it's a reality to you. And that's why you connect to it. When you read something and you go, oh, yeah, that's not that putting it into your head. It's because you've actually connected to it. So I turn those kind of things on their head because they need to be, because we've got so many debunkers out there and skeptics out there that want to pull people apart. And we all know that that's the case when they don't even know what they're talking about. And none of them have ever worked in hypnosis, as I've done over, you know, X number of years now. And you know the difference instantly. And some of the information that comes out consciously, they've got absolutely no idea of. And you'll have someone, I always remember this lady, because she went somnambulistic, in other words, unconscious. And she starts connecting to this mantis being with this clicking language. And she's in there and what have you. When she came out of it, I said, well, that was an interesting one. And she says, what do you mean? I said, well, you had a conversation. She couldn't believe it. She said, no, that's not me. That's not me. And it was a full conversation, the clicking, where she was having a conversation with this particular being. That's what I mean. It comes out and it's spontaneous, and there is no confabulation there, because there's no time for confabulation, because it's too instant.
I've written 6 textbooks, and I don't think there's anything out in the UFO literature like the books I've written. They're literally encyclopedic in their content. And I cover a lot of subjects, and I avoid subjective information, but I want the best available information. They're almost the same quality as a university textbook. Now, the thing is that with all my years of ET experience, not once have they brought me on board the craft. They've never told me anything about themselves. They've never imparted any information. And yet I've had groups of people with me who've experienced where they're being touched, or they're seeing flashes of light around the group, or even in some cases photographing ETs. And the thing is, none of us have had this abduction experience, as far as I know. And yet, I'm saying, here I am. My house is being open to you. You can come and visit anytime, and they have. The fact is, they've not given me my ride off the planet yet. And yet, you know, I listen to all these fascinating stories, and I'm thinking maybe I'm too grounded, and yet my knowledge covers astronomy and comparative religion and history. I've gone to university and taken many science courses. So the thing is, I'm well aware that I sometimes think that ETs pick out people that are receptive. And I'm saying, I think I'm receptive, but I need some information to go on. I believe they've been living in my house for at least a couple of months, because we've had things moved around, and you hear noises upstairs when we're downstairs and there's nobody else in the house. I've caught them coming out of the house, materializing through the wall. My first experience was very much like that. They were like Casper the Ghost. They came, 3 of them, they came through the wall into my bedroom. Nobody else saw it. I did. When I called out for help from my mother, I said, there's little men behind the door, and she'd go and check, and she just said, you're dreaming. And she calms me down, and she leaves, and they come right back again. And now I'm really panicking, because why am I seeing these beings? And they're about as real as any person standing before me. And again, she calms me down, leaves. As she leaves, they're there, and they're coming around the bottom of the bed towards me. And the thing about it is, the next day I realized that I had some kind of what I call a conscious expansion, because I was drawing pictures of rocket ships and stars and planets and stuff like that as a 5-year-old. And this was long before Barney and Betty Hill even had their experience. This was 8 years before them. So the thing is, I've had ETs throughout my life. I've seen all kinds of crap. I've been with Dr. Greer. I've seen tall ETs that are about 7 feet tall, dressed in dark cloaks.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I'm very much aware of it. I've had a download of ETs of different species, and some of them are truly bizarre that you would not even imagine what they even existed, but they're there.
What I'd like to ask you, first of all, is have you communicated with the ones that you energetically and have physically seen? Have you talked to them?
I'm being out in the field by myself. I was trying to operate my laser to sort of contact with them. I had issues with it. And at that moment, a craft flew over and I received a telepathic message. And all they said was, keep up the good work. That's all they said to me. And then another time, Dr. Greer said, go into a meditation, remote view an ET being, and ask if he will be your assistant. And I had a remote view, a lizard or reptilian type ET that looked like a gecko lizard, but humanoid. And I asked that ET with my mind. First of all, I introduced myself and I said, do you have a name? And he told me what the name was, which was bizarre, but he said, it's HGN. And I thought to myself, well, what kind of name is that? It made no sense. It took me about a month to figure out what his name was. It was Hugna, which guttural for lizard. I had to really think about it because it just didn't pop into my head. I had to really think about it. And then I realized I'm communicating with a reptilian type of being.
Yeah.
And if he was speaking to me, and what he was communicating was telepathy, but if he was speaking in his own tongue,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have understood it.
Yeah.
Other than these grunty noises.
Yeah.
And so that's the only communication I've had. I've put out to the universe, come and visit. This is a safe home for them. Come and visit. I've had 3 different types of ET show up at different times. My wife has seen one that startled her because there was a space right in front of her.
Yeah.
And she woke up out of her sleep and saw this thing, and it saw her and it disappeared as she was looking at it. And then she rolled over and punched me in the shoulder and said, that's one thing for you to go out and contact them. Do you have to bring them home? I've also participated with free. I gave information to them.
You'll have all the indicators that they're ready to communicate with you. So it's the next level that you need to go to so that you can communicate back. And I help a lot of people do that.
You're in Australia though, aren't you?
Oh, it doesn't make any difference.
I'm in Coquitlam on the west coast of BC.
Doesn't make any difference. I can show you how the modus operandi is when it comes to communicating with non-human intelligences. And the first thing is that you're recognizing their energetic signature. Then you know that, everyone has a different one. Then you need to bring in your clairvoyance as well as your clairaudience. I can show you how to do that. And I can show you then also how you do the communication. If that's what you really want to do, I can show you how to do it. I will tell you how many people now are communicating with them on a regular basis. It's just a matter of knowing how it works. I think that maybe up to now, you've probably, the reason they haven't gone to this next level with you is maybe they've wanted you to come over with your very credible material without colored by this other aspect of your experiences. I would suspect that may be part of the reason, because they usually let themselves move to that point when you're more than ready, but also if they've had a certain mandate with you of some kind.
There will be times when I feel like the earth underneath me is vibrating, and it'll start relatively in the beginning. I used to think, wow, I wonder if there's an earthquake happening, and then it will grow to where I truly feel like my entire body is vibrating, and I have no idea. I don't know. I've been trying to figure out what that is. Does anybody have any possible answers to what that might be?
I will also suggest that you listen to the activation and awakening presentation I'll be doing for Mimi. But the bottom line, because what's happening is your frequency is changing, and it's changing with a lot of people right now because we're in a process of that happening globally in terms of consciousness. And it sounds like you're very much part of that and tuned into that, because with a shift in vibration, you're going to a higher level of frequency where you can access more.
Yeah, and I feel like
awareness
it's
or
an out of
something. That-
world.
That
it's-
is what's going on.
Yeah, and I feel like it's not related to this. Yeah, there is something that happened to me on a regular basis as a child, and it started when I was probably about 7 and lasted until I was about 12. You know, they talk about astral traveling and all this kind of stuff. Which I know things that I have no reason that I should know them, but so what would happen was I would all of a sudden be somewhere in space spinning so fast, and there would be nothing but a ton of different lights, and I'd be out in the universe. It got to the point where, and it terrified me, and it got to the point where I would recognize, oh my goodness, it's going to happen tonight, because I would get this tin taste in my mouth, and I would be absolutely terrified because it was a terrifying experience. But it was and it was the same experience over and over and over again. Often wondered what that could have been. I mean, is that, and also associated with it, I think, was some type of fear about returning. But even when I was in my early teens, I was, reading Edgar Cayce and studying, metaphysical stuff. And
I didn't hear all of that, but what it sounds like to me, and sounds like you're going out of body in some way and being shown the cosmos through your frequency, and that can be scary. That sounds like it might be something like that. But what I would suggest to you is you start to see if you can get a sense of why that's happening. Well, have you thought of asking so you've not had any information that's helped you understand what that experience was? So what do you sense was going on?
I felt like I was being pulled. Out of
that I
was being taken. That I was not in control.
That was the fear, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You were not in control, but it does sound like you were going out of body and having that experience, but not feeling as though it was on your level, consciously controlling it.
I mean, and it took a while, but with this taste, I would have a taste, and it was going to happen tonight, and it would happen. And I would do everything I could not to go to sleep, because it would only happen once I went to sleep.
Yeah.
So I would try to do everything I could to stay awake.
And lots of people that are about to have an encounter of some form are aware of it before.
So my daughter talks about when she experiences that she changes forms. Like she has many different forms. She calls it shape shifting when she's out looking at the universe, right? So she said to me, I don't think I'm just one form. But you were just speaking about changing forms I didn't quite understand it, to access different ships or different.
Some people are aware, certainly some of the newer generations, the more awake generations, to their abilities, that they can move into other forms. If they go out of body, they may go into another form, either as astral traveling, they can choose a form to be, or they can go on board craft. If they have a connection, say, to a particular species, they may actually be able to move into that form on board craft.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. She has knowledge. When you were talking about knowledge of complex stuff.
One young lady who has very conscious memory of astral traveling a lot and going out of body, she connects to her Izoni form, which is, she's actually got purple skin, and she actually has that form when she astral travels because she likes that form. It's a one that she's comfortable with.
So my question to you is, what the heck was that? And I mean, what is your opinion?
Well, it sounds very interesting in the sense, the synchronicity of seeing this soul and being drawn to this soul, and then having them close to your home says there was something more supernormal than ordinarily. It's not just a coincidence, is it? There was something obviously very special. What was the song like? Did it make you feel any different after you heard it?
Just a feeling of just accomplishment. I was just so happy that I had been able to came to fruition in such a complete way that you want something to happen, and then it happens.